Welcome back, everyone, to the Crimson Tide Sports Network. This is Roger Hoover, and it's great to have you with us for what we're calling The Big Picture, brought to you by Legacy of Hope, Alabama. You know, saving a life has never been easier, as you can register online at legacyofhope.org to be an organ, eye, and tissue donor. You can give the gift of life by becoming an organ donor today, thanks to our friends at Legacy of Hope. We call this The Big Picture because we're taking a little more of a national view at Alabama football as we get ready for Saturday, Alabama against Texas A&M, and all across the nation. Fans will be watching CBS and listening to the voice of the SEC on CBS, Brad Nessler, who now joins us over the phone. And Brad, it's great to talk to you. How's everything going in week 2 of the SEC season?
I'm just glad there's week 2, Roger. That's the big news. We wanted to get that first one out of the way last week, and that was a shocker down at Baton Rouge, and I think everybody opened their eyes a little bit about what Mississippi State did. But I'm kind of like Commissioner Sankey. I wanted to get to September 26th and not worry about December 19th right now. But so far, so good. We'll keep our fingers crossed.
We certainly will. And for you, what was your off-season like? I know typically you like to go to some campuses and see a lot of preseason camp, but what has your preparation process been like getting ready for this college football season during the pandemic?
It's been really different. It's kind of hard. We spent some time with some of the coaches on Zoom, that type of thing, and did as much, I guess, research as we could that way. But, you spend, not that spring ball is that big a deal. Most of the spring games are, glorified scrimmages, and the coaches don't show you anything anyway. But it does give you a little bit of an inclination on who's going to be in what position and who's going to be starting and that type of thing. So that was all washed out. And I think at that point, everybody was just trying to survive and make sure you're going to wake up the next day and not be sick. So went through several months of that just like everybody else, and then when we got closer to the season starting, we started to have concerns whether there was going to be a season, and then if we were going to do the games remotely and that type of thing. So for instance, Gary and I have studios basically built into our offices right now just in case something happens or if one of us should test positive. So there was a lot of that kind of thing going on. And I think, football was kind of put on the back burner. It was just what everybody else was going through, the struggles everybody had. Hopefully, not losing anybody or the physical issues, all of that, and just the quarantine part. My hair was probably longer than it's been since college. That was kind of different. But,
same here.
No, it was just as weird as everybody else. That's for sure.
Well, we're glad we were able to watch you and Gary last week for the Mississippi State LSU game. And kind of from a production standpoint or things in the booth, what has changed with all the protocols that are in place for you guys to come on the air?
Oh, it's really remarkable because, we spend a lot of time. There's probably, I don't know, by the time we get around to doing the Army-Navy game and the SEC championship game, we probably have between 85 and 90 people on our crew, something like that. Sometimes it's even bigger. And, we're like a big family, and we do a lot of things together. And it's not just the announcers hanging out with the announcers. It's the camera guys and the tape guys and the audio people. And everybody kind of hangs together. In fact, every year when we have a game in Florida, we all stay at the same hotel, and we have a big barbecue outside. And the hotel's nice enough to let us grill out. And so we have a huge party. And so we do that occasionally. And none of that is happening to start with. So we're kind of in these, I guess you would call them pods. The truck people are one pod. The camera guys and the people that are on the field are another pod. The people in the booth, Gary and I, my spotter, my statistician, we're considered a pod. So we can't get together at all. And it's really weird. I didn't see Jamie Erdahl until Saturday morning when we were getting in the cars to go to the stadium, and everybody had their own car, and then that's different too. We usually ride together to the stadium and talk about maybe what the open's going to be, if it's Gary and I, whatever. And then in the booth itself, just like all the networks for the most part have the plexiglass in between the announcers, and we had to kind of change things around because I'm used to having our spotter in between Gary and I. But if we would have done that, Gary and I would have been a mile apart when they did the on camera. So we sort of switched things up, and it's kind of like going from being right-handed your whole life to being left-handed. When I had to look to my left instead of to my right, my spotter is my buddy from college, and we've been doing it together for 30 years, and we've been friends for I don't even want to say how many years because I'll age myself, but so everything is different in the booth itself, and everything is sanitized, and our equipment's all in bags, and it goes on and on and on. But I kind of did a video of it last week because I was trying to explain it to my wife and my daughter, and so I did a little video thing, and we were laughing about that because we all had masks on. It was crazy. The only time we didn't have masks on was when we were actually doing the game. So pretty strange.
Pretty strange indeed. And then there was a lot of uncertainty about LSU's roster with some opt-outs. We get the Derek Stingley news right before kickoff, and you knew Mississippi State with Coach Leach would try to have the air raid going, but just what a victory for the Bulldogs, really surprising the college football world over this past Saturday.
I didn't think they'd get it cranked up that fast to that degree, and, it would have been nice. I'm sure a couple, maybe those long touchdowns, maybe Derek Stingley makes a difference, but they just got it handed to them, and I knew it was going to be tough for LSU. They just can't lose 14 players to the NFL and, 3 or 4 more that opt out, and then Stingley's sick. So from that standpoint, and then trying to you can't replace Joe Burrow. It's just impossible, and Miles Brennan was as good as he could be, but, they just lost too much talent, and I think they'll probably have a hard time hitting the 8-win mark, maybe, unless they really, batten down the hatches on defense and get better on offense.
Well, now this week you're headed to Tuscaloosa for Alabama against Texas A&M, and what has you most excited from the Alabama perspective? You saw a lot of the key players last year, even Mac Jones in the Iron Bowl, but what has you most excited about seeing the 2020 version of the Crimson Tide?
I think just to see, how they filled some of the spots that are empty there, but they have a lot more spots that filled back up, either by guys that got back from injury or people that played a lot. And, to lose 2 number 1 draft choices at wide receiver, you knew that was going to, deplete that part of the roster. But when you got Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith back, it's like anybody in the country would take those 2 right off the top and say, well, I'm sorry, there's not 4 anymore, but there's still 2, and they'll have some other ones that'll fill in there as they go. And then, just having Najee and Mac back offensively, the continuity that those guys have, and, Najee's a Heisman Trophy candidate. I think there's no doubt about that. And if he keeps playing like he did last week, that'll just keep improving as the weeks go along. And then, some of the guys that didn't have a chance to play last year because of injury on defense that are back, and you knew they would be, and you knew that would solidify the defense. I think they're going to be as good, if not better, than they were a year ago. And I know a lot of people thought, well, that's just not an Alabama defense last year. Well, I think the time has come that you just aren't going to give people, 7 points or 10 points or 13 points a game. The offenses have just gotten too good, and there's too many spread offenses that spread everybody out. And so I think they'll be more like the Alabama defense everybody expected to see in the last couple of years.
Then on the flip side, Texas A&M had maybe a closer than expected game against Vanderbilt in Week 1. Do you expect the Aggies to play a little sharper coming up in Week 2 against Alabama?
They're going to have to, or they're going to get their doors blown off. I'll tell you that much. I think there's just been so much speculation about this was their year. It's year 3 of Jimbo. It's Kellen Mond, a senior, a veteran that's been there and done that. And you kind of looked at their schedule before the schedule got redone, and I think everybody was salivating, going, wait a minute, these guys could be 9-1 or 10-0 when it gets really interesting, in the back half of the season. And then when the season was redone and reshuffled to the 10-game conference schedule, you looked at it and go, oh, I don't think it's going to be quite that easy for them. And obviously they struggled out of the blocks against Vanderbilt, and I just don't know. I've been waiting. I really like Kellen Mond a lot, and I think everybody that watches him play has seen him flash, and go, man, this guy can really be good. By the time he's a senior, he's really going to be good. Well, he's a senior, and he's still kind of struggling. I mean, he makes plays at times, and then other times it's just like, what was that about? And, in his defense, if he had, Jamon Osmond back, his buddy since IMG Academy and his number 1 target last year, and then, Cameron Buckley would have been probably his number 1 slot guy. They lost a lot in the receiving core. The guys they got back, I mean, you add them up, and, they maybe had 6 catches, his top 3 receivers a year ago that were either played a couple games and were redshirted or didn't play at all. So I think he's lost his security blanket. He still got a really good tight end, but he would have had 2 good tight ends and a slot guy and his number 1 receiver, and that would have made, I think, a pretty big difference for them. Yet I think I got two really good running backs. They got to get those guys in some space, and Nia Smith and especially Isaiah Spiller. So there's talent there, and their offensive line is a veteran offensive line. Should be good enough to score more than 17 points against a team like Vandy. So, like I said, if they're not way better than they were last weekend, I don't think they're going to have very good luck at Bryant-Denny either.
Well, as we start to wrap things up, Brad, as you make your way to Alabama for this weekend's game, a lot's going to be different this Saturday with some of their regular game day traditions not in place. But for you, getting to call a game on CBS or throughout the years, ESPN, ABC before that, just what do you enjoy the most about coming to Tuscaloosa and calling an Alabama home game?
Oh, man, I love the fans. I know there's not going to be, the 100,000, 102,000. Well, I guess 100,077 now when everybody gets back with the revamped stadium. That's just everything I like about it. I mean, we kind of go to the same haunts all the time, and you see the same people when we get off the bus or out of the car, and people are so friendly. And, well, they are to me. I don't know about Gary. That might be a different story. Everybody's always down on Gary. Gary loves Alabama. I don't know,
right.
But I don't know. That's part of the fun, I guess. We were. It wasn't an Alabama game; it was an LSU game a couple of years ago, and we were out to dinner, and some guys were just a little humorous thing to kind of wrap it up for you. Talking about people don't like certain announcers and that type of thing. So we're at dinner, and these guys, a bunch of young guys in their 20s, were looking at us, and they finally came over and said, "Hey, can we get a picture with you guys? When you're done eating?" We said, "Sure, no problem." So we huddled about 5 or 6 of the guys around together, and Gary and I guess the next. Somebody takes a picture, and they hand it to the guy that asked us, hand the camera, or the phone rather, back to the guy that asked us if we could take the picture, and he goes, "Man, this is awesome. I got to send this to my dad because he hates your guts." I'm like, there you go. Life's in the big time, doing games, So I'm sure we'll get a little bit of that, but, with masks on, maybe people won't recognize us when we get there.
Yeah, that's true. Or you can't hear them making any insults or anything like that.
Exactly, because I swear I have to read lips half the time. I just, excuse me. I'm still trying to get through the whole mask thing.
Oh, that's pretty funny. Well, Brad, safe travels coming to Tuscaloosa for this weekend. We look forward to your call on CBS with Gary and Jamie of Alabama against Texas A&M. But just thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
Should be fun, Roger. Good talking to you, buddy.
All right. Thanks to Brad Nessler of CBS, and thank you for watching the Crimson Tide Sports Network.